Hey, greetings everyone. It is GleeCon and I am here again. You just can't keep me down. Up off the mat, bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we played through Darkshire, and in that one we really didn't kill too much, killed a few Worgen, but it was a lot of running around finding some different lore, like go talk to him, go talk to him, go talk to him, and we learned about the kind of creepy story of Stalvin, and we also started investigating a missing noble. We did a little bit of ingredient gathering for a noble brew as well. So just a few different things. I've caught up with it off camera with Erator, and on our next episode, he will pick up the mallet and continue pressing that story forward. We've also been reading through the World of Warcraft Official Magazine, the first issue of the second volume, the fifth total issue, the final total issue. The last time we read this, we read about people making movies in-game, and now we're going to look about, I think, maybe some of the crew that makes the sound in the game with an article titled The Sound. Sound team. Composers and a voice director turned the volume up to 11 to tell us the secrets behind World of Warcraft soundtrack. Some of them are amazing. Keep an eye out in future issues. So yeah, here's a hint that they have no idea it's over. For a feature on Blizzard's talented group of Foley artists responsible for Azeroth's sound effects. Sound team. From the looped bleeps and bloops of early arcade games to the symphonic scores of today's titles, sound has always played an integral part in the gaming experience, whether iconic, who can't sing the first notes of Super Mario Bros., or infamous, the X-Men arcade games I Am Magneto, Master of Magnet. The score, sound effects, and dialogue add to and expand on the content. For a game with as much depth as World of Warcraft, it's important that the audio experience delivers on the same principles that drive the rest of the game. We sat down with the group responsible for creating everything you hear in the Blizzard universe and discussed their tricks, tools, and motivations behind the oral side of Azeroth. Tune up the band. Music. Jam with the men behind Stormwind symphonies and Orgrimmar's oratorios. Without a soundtrack, Molten Core would be mute, Stormwind would descend into silence, and Ragefire Chasm would change its name to Reticent Chasm. Luckily, a skilled team of musicians and sound designers populate Azeroth with sweeping scores and subtle songs. Glenn Stafford and Derek Duke, both senior composers and sound designers, are Blizzard veterans. Glenn worked on Warcraft Orcs and Humans. I was the original sound guy, he says. Derek got his start with Blizzard as a contractor working on music for StarCraft, and shortly thereafter officially joined the team and cut his teeth on the Warcraft universe with Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos. Russell Brower, audio director and composer, found his way to Blizzard after years of creating music and sound for themed entertainment, film, and television, where he earned 3 Emmy Awards. His first foray into sound design took place in the early 80s for interactive games and theme parks. These weren't video games, these were big things running on mainframes that you could only do if you went to the theme park and actually played it there. Games were suddenly a great convergence of technology, art, and in that case music, because real computers meant no bleeps and bloops. We actually had primitive sampled sounds, but then there was this long swatch of time where with early home video game systems, which were just bleeps and bloops, so I wasn't all that interested. Drawn back to the industry in 2002 and coming on board with Blizzard in 2005, Russell has found new appeal in exploring interactive entertainment. It's been an incredible chance to really flex my interest in orchestras, world music, vocal music, choirs, and everything. I mean, between our 3 major intellectual properties, IP, there's just about every style that we could want to play with. How do you decide where to use music? Most of the musical decisions are left to us. We're presented with artwork, designs, or stuff like that, and we're going to choose, oh yes, it would be good to be up-tempo, or I'd like to use this sound. We seek out the information from the design teams. When they have special mechanics, such as in raid encounters, they say, oh, there's this point where the boss doubles or triples in size and sends out this kind of attack at this kind of event. So by getting that kind of information and feedback from the designers and looking at the art, then we can decide how best to score that. And then there are times when we will get direct feedback or direction. But a lot of times it's, oh, I think this could use something musical. Would you like to do something for it? And we make the call if we think we can bring something that can help. Is it different for in-game music and cinematics? Usually with the cinematics, it's a linear thing. It's always going to be the same when you watch it. The director usually has a really specific emotion in mind that he wants to emphasize or portray in the music. In those cases, we take much more close directions, such as we want to beat here, we want to swell here, we want to feel this emotion at this point, and then here's the climax of the piece. So it really has to have a contour and a flow to it. The game stuff is less defined as to where the high points are, and it's not a linear time frame, so we can't always score every moment. We certainly want to get across the mood of the areas, so we'll call on the designers, the artists, the writers, and the creative people involved to just give us a sense of what they want here. Sometimes it's pretty obvious. If it's Deathwing or a burning volcano, it has to be big and dark and epic. When you've made a decision to use music, what comes next? Sometimes it's playing on the piano, sometimes it's making a mock-up with different sounds, and sometimes it's just hashing it out, making sure I know what I'm hearing in my head and doing it right. Typically, the inspiration for the original idea, the essence of the idea, or the simple theme that you come up with is often accidental or just something I'm doing while sitting down at the piano and not so much trying to write. I try to take advantage of those moments and make a note of it on or record it somehow, and then store it for later or jump on it right away if I need it. Once I start to develop the themes, here's a picture of the sound crew. Glenn Stafford, senior composer and sound designer, Russell Brower, composer and audio director, and Derek Duke, senior composer, sound designer. I do that on the computer with software and various sample libraries and a sequencer. I try not to rely on or get stuck in the trap of writing on the sequencer and being limited to the instruments. If you run into technical problems, then bam, your idea is just watered down. It's just gone or changed. The technical challenges can tend to kill the creativity sometimes. It's left brain versus right brain. So I prefer to keep the initial writing part on something that doesn't have too many glitches, like a piano, something where it doesn't get in the way of what I'm trying to do. Piano tends to be the greatest instrument for being able to imagine. For some reason, you can imagine what other instruments are doing when you play a piano. But if you use the sound of a cello, you're only going to be hearing the sound of a cello. But even if you're playing an electronic piano or a sample piano, it seems easy to imagine other instruments while testing them out on a piano. Yeah, typically you start with a melody and then you harmonize. You put things underneath the melody. That's the traditional or correct way to write music, I guess. But the way I look at it, it could be any aspect of it. It could be the melody, it could be a bass line, it could be a rhythmic thing, it could be just a chord progression. Whatever the spark is, I kind of use that as the basis and develop on top of that. Typically, if I do something rhythmic, if I just do drums first, forget about it. I don't write anything good. It'll just be drums. So taking multiple notes that change chords over time, I try to encapsulate that as the idea, the essence, or the theme, and then develop it from there. Do you guys collaborate? Do you bounce ideas off each other, or is there a back and forth? It definitely happens. We even work on each other's stuff here and there. He'll take a theme I did and add some percussion, so there's definitely some back and forth collaboration. When there's been so much written before by all of us, and then the story is continuing and it's being built on things that have come before it, you can always borrow something to sort of lend or extend the meaning, extend the bloodline to further the story. We've done lots of different troll music, for the Amani, the Gurbashi, and the Land of Zuldrak. Forest troll music is different than jungle troll or beachside troll music. So I can take those themes and build them and churn them in a different way because the story is continuing. So I'm taking a melody that he wrote a long time ago for something, and he might listen to an old PvP piece of music and grab something out of that. For the Blood Elves, I ended up writing a whole series of melodies or motifs that were based around this idea of the solo cello, and then on top of it, a bit of an angelic choir. That became the backdrop for the Sunstrider Isle starting area, later Silvermoon City. It was one of the melodies out of that collection that became Lament of the Highborn, and I collaborated with Derek on that, which ended up being a whole quest line in and of itself. That middle line there is kind of quoting some of that what we just read. And there is that magical sort of osmosis that happens. For instance, when we were first looking at Howling Fjord and first starting to get into Northrend, I was in my office and I did this thing for bagpipes. And I went to talk to Russell about something, and he said, I was thinking of hiring a pipes player so we could get some bagpipes and some Irish flute for the cinematic introducing Northrend for BlizzCon that year. And I said, oh, well, come here and listen. I just wrote something for bagpipes too. So it was like we were both somehow on that same page in our approach to the Howling Fjord. That's like a collaboration without even having to collaborate. It was similar with a Swedish instrument called a nyckelharpa. It's a fingered string instrument like a violin or viola looking thing, but you lay it flat and it has wood keys that you play almost like a piano where it presses down the strings. It just has a really unique kind of old creaky sound and it makes little clicks. You and Russell used it. He used it a bit in the Grizzly Hills music. I'm not sure where you used it. There were those songs as you're traveling on a boat. Are you assigned to certain things? Is there a gnome guy or a troll guy? I'm the gnome guy. I'm the troll guy. Here's him, again, using his instrument. A keyboard is in a prominent place in Derek's office with good reason. Piano tends to be the greatest instrument for being able to imagine. He's got all kinds of music, multiple cups of coffee and drink. Lament of the Highborn, here's the actual song. After completing Journey to Undercity in the Lament of the Highborn questline, talk to Ambassador Sunsorrow and he'll give you a book with song lyrics. Yeah, I've got that before. So here's Lament of the Highborn. Ooh, it's going to be a squinter. Horde players may stumble upon the Lady's Necklace, a random drop from mobs surrounding Windrunner Spire and Ghostlands, but this is no meager piece of costume jewelry. It begins a quest of the same name and leads to one of the most popular events in World of Warcraft, the Lament of the Highborn. At the end of the questline, you return the necklace, Illyria's lost gift to her sister Sylvanas, the undead banshee in Undercity. Sylvanas rewards you with a hauntingly beautiful song, The Lament of the Highborn. However, this wasn't the first time players heard an iteration of this song. The melody was one of several in the Blood Elf starting area, Russell says, and for some reason, that melody was sounding lyrical to me. It seemed like the beginnings of a song and not just another little roller coaster ride of emotion. Russell then approached the melody with the intent of creating a structure with verses and a chorus. He showed it to Derek, who created the lyrics based on Warcraft's Thalassian language. At the studio, we had finished our sessions for the day, and the last thing we recorded was the female angelic choir. There was one standing soloist singer in there, Vanjie Gunn, who we asked to stay behind to try, just for the heck of it, singing this melody. We rolled the tape and she began sight singing the score. What you hear in the song is first take, and it works because it was really honest. Her interpretation had us just on the floor practically sobbing. We didn't know what we had until we heard her sing it. Russell drew on the themes he developed for the Blood Elf starting zone and turned this song into an experience that he compared to some of our oldest stories. Like so many nursery rhymes and fairy tales that we have in real life, a lot of them actually have kind of tragic beginnings and origins and meanings such as this. Here, the lore in the lyrics refers to the Blood Elf race and a tragic past. Explaining the mood to Vanjie, Russell described the song as a centuries-old folk song. The words have changed over the years to mean different things, but it's an old melody in Azeroth lore, more like something you'd sing to yourself or maybe to a child or something. Despite Vanjie's spectacular performance, the song still didn't have a concrete place in Azeroth. I played it for Chris Metz, and Russell continues, and without even hesitation, he just said, I know exactly what this is, what it should be called, and who should sing it. So we didn't even know it was going to be Sylvanas Windrunner until Metzen heard it finished, and it just spoke to him. And he named it Lament of the Highborn and set up the backstory of why she would sing this. A month later, Derek and Russell learned that a quest line had been created for the song. A player favorite, the music quickly reached beyond the game. It has been performed with a full orchestra at BlizzCon and Video Games Live, and played at weddings and memorial services even before Alfred Music Publishing released licensed sheet music. With people wanting to buy this sheet music, it's like, how often does that happen? And it's more significant than simply putting out another product. It means it's in the schools. It means a whole new generation of musicians will be learning this and influenced by it. That's actually pretty cool. That's like legacy stuff. He's the Horde guy, back to the interview for the most part, laughing. However, it's not necessarily a direct assignment. In the original StarCraft, I was on Zerg, Glenn did the Terran, and Jason Hayes did the Protoss. When I came and was doing Warcraft 3, I did the Undead and a little bit of Orc. It tended to be an easy way to break up the game. In more recent years, we tend to mix it up. Russell's done some troll music as well. A lot of times it's, oh, I have an idea for this. Sometimes it's race-based, sometimes it's area-based, sometimes there's more than one person. Is there any piece of music that you're particularly proud of? Each expansion has had its sweet spots. I think there are certainly some really magic moments in Northrend where the music and the visuals of the area just stood out. Yeah, I think Northrend's the best music in the game. The Ulialn pipes and Howling Fjord, the way that matched with the Highlands and the sort of Vikingness of the Valkyr, I think that was really successful. One of the fun things about Cataclysm, besides just the two new races, was we revisited a lot of old music. We got to sort of do it as we would have liked to have done it back in the day because we have more access to real musicians and orchestras. With doing Morog, we finally got to do more music for Gnomeregan, which is really awesome because I think in the original I wrote maybe 3 minutes of gnome music for Tinkertown and some for the Leperized Gnomeregan. So being able to do a bit more gnome music and give them some more of their own music was pretty cool. People recognize those old tunes and it's just a little different. I think Arathi Highlands is probably a good example of something I'm proud of. Also Storm Peaks from Wrath of the Lich King. Instead of the high strings and bells and harps, it was more of a, I want to say death march, but it's not a death march, but with the choir and the way it kind of fell together, it sort of has a peaceful yet very, very sad thing to it that wasn't typical of some of the other wintry zones. I had fun working on the Blood Elf starting area for the Burning Crusade. Music communicates on a different level and can tell you things that, well, for all practical reasons, don't need to be localized into different languages. It can communicate things about their past as well as hook up with the mood around you. One of the first things I noticed was this paradox of great beauty in this race versus the tragic backstory, which that's the page quote there. I zeroed in on the sound of the solo cello because to me that sound is at once beautiful and also capable of being very melancholy at the same time. What are the challenging aspects of creating a soundtrack? I think for me the cinematics are the most challenging things, whether it's a rendered cinematic or any cinematic cutscene. Typically the designer or director has a more specific thing they want to portray, and that's really the art of mind reading. They can sit there and explain it to you all day, but you can't hear what's in their head. You can't know what it should sound like unless they happen to be a musician and they sketch it out for you. When it comes to World of Warcraft, I would say there isn't anything that we can do that isn't challenging because we'll redo something if it's not right or if it's not up to our expectations or criteria. So I think what happens is there are certain things that take longer. You might sit on that idea or you might keep concept artwork on your wall longer before you ever try and touch it because it's stewing. It's stewing around waiting for you to find the right idea. I did some music for the Lost Isles and the Goblins a couple of years before it was as far along as it was, and when it came time to do it, I just threw that away because it had developed in a different way and suddenly there was something else to speak to. Sometimes the simplest stuff ends up being the most challenging. They want something really basic, really simple, or a really simple emotion. It's just Murphy's Law, I guess. The easiest stuff ends up being the stuff you bang your head over a long time. I think there's the magic in us all working together in the same building and being surrounded by the people in the artwork and being around the games all the time. You're in that game so much, and you just begin to imagine what it should sound like. Let our voices be heard. Meet Azeroth's local vocal coach. Voice. All actors attempt to create a suspension of disbelief for the audience. In essence, they hope to trick their audience into forgetting they're witnessing a performer and instead see a character. Sets, costumes, blocking, props, and scenery are all tools that a stage or screen actor can draw on to present their character, but a voice actor has none of these. What they do have is Andrea Toyas, a casting and voice director whose job for the last 3 years has been to ensure that a World of Warcraft character's inflection and delivery expands on and deepens both the lines of dialogue and the player experience. A self-proclaimed music junkie, Andrea fell in love with game dialogue very quickly. It has a rhythm, poetry, and magic to it in the same way music does for me, she said. When in the studio recording, I'm not listening to the takes with my everyday ears, but rather with the same ears I use at home when basking in my favorite album. I know we've got good dialogue when I get the same chills I get from it that I get from my favorite albums. When Arthas's defiant decrees make you shudder or Goblin cracks you up, remember Andrea is the puppet master behind the voices of Azeroth. How do you begin to find the voice for a character? I kind of view myself as the universal translator between Blizzard and the acting community. Anybody who's into games and the kind of fantasy realm that Blizzard cultivates has a certain language, a certain vernacular, and a certain way of talking about what we want. The attributes we want tend to be in Blizzard speak, and so I try to get in early brainstorming meetings to get a feel for what the team wants. A lot of what I have to do is hash it out with them a bit more because they might have this one kind of thing in mind, and then I have to come in and try to pull the specifics out of them. I need more than, oh, like that person in that movie. I need to find out, what did you like about him exactly? Was it the character, his voice, his performance? So I guess it's helping them really crystallize what they're thinking in their head. Then I have to take that back to my desk, and my joke is I'll come back with 30 pages of notes about one voice, and then I've got to parse that down to one page because there's so much. I get this whole elaborate, dense kind of encyclopedia of what they want, and then I have to take that and condense it down to actor speak and really identify the main traits we're after. What is the specific character arc? What are the emotional beats this character in particular is going to hit? On top of that, then you throw in what does an orc, troll, goblin, or werewolf sound like? There's this deep character motivation, and the character is also a werewolf. What does that sound like? What's the casting process like? Is it true you often record and re-record roles? I put together character specs that include the obvious vocal traits, what kind of timbre, male or female, age, low, gravelly type of accent, whether they're otherworldly creatures or not, etc. Then we try to find some motivating factors, humanistic traits that we can identify with, a backstory, how our character got to be, what their struggle is, and what they're looking for. When the actors initially audition, it's not going to be they're auditioning them in person as they're recording their read in their agent's office. The agent simply hands them the script, so this is my chance to direct via paper. I also identify the best lines for them to audition with, because if we know that character is going to have an emotional arc, we need to make sure weave. This is Andrea, the casting and voice director, sitting over a Blizzard folder with a BlackBerry. Here's her directing the actors, watching them. Got a yelling line, an intense line, an intimate line to see what the actor's range is. I usually sift through approximately 150 to 200 auditions because I really want to look everywhere and listen to every one. I want to find new talent, new voices, and fresh sounds. There's so much of an art to casting because when you go through the initial 200, it's quite easy to pinpoint the ones you don't like immediately. I go through approximately 4 levels of listening to the auditions. By the time you get down to your last 30 or 40 auditions, it's such a gray area. You really have to think about, who is my character? I really do rely a lot on the music, especially for Cataclysm, in order to get a better feel for the sound of, for what the sound of the game will be like. I was listening to the Worgen and Goblin tracks over and over to guide me as to what voices would be a best fit for the game. For example, the Goblins can't be too cartoony since they're also kind of tough. I want to make sure the voice I get matches the game because once you get down to those last 30 actors, you really need to be laser clear as to what you want. Finally, I would reduce my list of final candidates to about 10 or 15 people and then take it to the team and we'd go through it all and arm wrestle and choose our favorite. So you've got to find these delicate balances just in the auditions as a starting point. Okay. How much of the dialogue is scripted? It's completely scripted, but I think that we also fully recognize that when the actors in the booth are recording, they are that character. Whatever they come up with, we're very open to it, and we do sometimes let them ad-lib on the fly. If we hear somebody really owning a role and we're getting a whole new idea, then the writers around the room will start adding new lines. We're kind of creating it all together at the same time, so it's not locked down. There's lots of room to play and experiment. Who is your favorite role to cast? Well, I get chills to this day when I talk about the trade prince Gallywix, the leader of the goblins. We brought this guy in and I just had a voice to go off of. No photos of the actor, so I had no idea what to expect. This guy shows up a bit out of breath and in gym shorts, like he jogged to the studio, which is fine, but just not what I expect for Gallywix, right? He goes into the booth and in a flash, he physically became Gallywix. It was one of the most profound moments of my life because his body contoured and suddenly he starts talking like he's a mobster, but goblin style. And I couldn't even talk because he became Gallywix, not only in voice, but he also physically transformed into Gallywix in front of my eyes. I don't know if people appreciate how hard it is because you're in a recording studio in this case, New York. You hear distracting horns outside and you're in a small, say 5 foot by 5 foot little glass jar and you've got to pretend you're a goblin and you're saying lines that nobody says in real life. It's one thing if you're a film or television actor because you have props and makeup and other actors to work off. But with voiceover, you're by yourself in a glass jar acting like a badass goblin. And our actor did it so well. The writers and I were talking afterwards. He took Gallywix to a level we never even knew existed. It's one thing when you write the script. It's one thing when you cast it. But when you hear it vocalized, and when the actors make it their own, you really fall in love with the character and want to know more about him or her. That was the quote about that guy changing into Gallywix. We do have a sidebar on mood lighting. Recording lines from inside a small glass box, it can be difficult for a voice actor to transform themselves into their character, especially if it's a reinvigorated dragon aspect with magma coursing through his body. So when it came time to record Deathwing's ferocious tones, Andrea wanted to set the scene. I wanted to really help him get in the zone, she said, so he turned all the lights off so it was really dark, lit candles, and I covered his little 5-foot glass jar with pictures of Deathwing in flames. When the actor walked in, the intended effect wasn't immediate, and Andrea had to reassure him, we're not doing a demonic ritual. I just wanted to set that tone, because that's the space where Deathwing comes from. Was there a role that proved troublesome to cast? The hardest one by far were the female Worgen, because women in general don't have that kind of weight and girth to their voice. A lot of the women I was auditioning, once they tried to be a werewolf, they sounded like the Wicked Witch of the West, or like a crabby soccer mom in her van in Los Angeles. I could find women who had a gruff, growly voice, but it would last 5 minutes and their voice would be blown out. We had to really dig deep to find women who had these amazing, deep, guttural voices and who could sustain their texture and sound. In addition, the challenge with Cataclysm was introducing new races. You're not just casting one character, but you're really bringing a whole race to life. So you've got to cast your different characters and think about them both individually and as a whole. You want to beef the world up and make it diverse and interesting. You can have your more depressed Worgen, your happy Worgen, but you can't go too far in either direction. You have to think about the emotional range and sound for each race, each character. But when you get the right actor in the right role, it's like you're tapping into the universe. Because something magical happens that nobody can predict. And suddenly, before your eyes and before your ears, amazing characters are brought to life. So that was actually a pretty dense article, much longer and in-depth than I thought. And it keeps slowing us down. So the next one we have on tap, I don't think, let's see, it's called Vanity Dark Moon. It looks like it's a lot of pictures. Okay, we'll read it because it's not like a lot of words. It looks like it's a like almost like a visual thing. So we can check this one out. This is a community thing. It's an outfits section. Armor is more than a set of stats. It helps define, Vanity Dark Moon Fair. It helps define who your character is. A mage should appear mystical, a rogue, sneaky and dangerous. Item sets from dungeons accentuate these images for all the classes, from the garish wings of a warlock to the understated robes of a druid. The clothes give us another connection to our characters, and thus they become entrenched in memory long after their usefulness in battle has passed. Here are two of my favorite tier sets, along with an overall view of my class, the warrior. What are some of your favorites? Do you have any interesting stories associated with collecting them? Let me know and we'll feature them in a future issue. This is, says Marty Cortinas. Except, psych, there are no future issues. Item sets are a reward for defeating the bad guys, but they provide more than just stats. So this is a cool, almost to me, it makes me, well, first of all, I would imagine this is like a paladin set, but it reminds me almost of tier. It's cool. It's called Judgment Armor. It's a tier 2 paladin set that drops from Onyxia's Lair, Molten Core, and Blackwing Lair. I've never seriously played a paladin, but I have a deep love of the Judgment Armor, a tier 2 raid set. It looks nothing like the other paladin armor in World of Warcraft, yet there's no mistaking the class of the character that wears it. It screams, I'm a paladin and I'm not to be trifled with. For me, the allure of the set comes down to details. The books and daggers, never mind that paladins can't wield them, on the shoulders, the scale insignia, and the emotionless mask with the glowing eyes. And here's a picture of the art of it. It is actually a freaking cool set. I am a paladin, and I am not to be trifled with. Here's some more. We have the tier 1 Battle Gear of Might. Probably a warrior set, because we've got a sword and board guy there. And tier 2 Battle Gear of Wrath. That looks like an arms warrior. And he's also, if you ever read the Dritz Duerden books, there's the Gut Buster Brigade, and they have these helmets they use as weapons. And they hug the people to death. Kind of reminds me of that. Tier 3 is the Dreadnought's Battle Gear. He looks like he's dual wielding a mace. Tier 4 is the Warbringer Battle Gear. That is also Arms Warrior 2-hander. Tier 5, the Destroyer Battle Gear. That is pretty cool. And the mace is enormous. Tier 6, Onslaught Battle Gear, Axe and Shield. Tier 7, Heroes Dreadnought Battle Gear. I don't even know what that's supposed to be. He has like one weapon. Maybe he's a dual wielder. Tier 8, Valorous Siegebreaker Battle Gear. I can't tell. It looks like a one-hander also. Tier 9, Triumphant Rin's Battle Gear. Like a polearm. Look at that little gnome in the tier 2 or tier 3 set. Tier 10, Sanctified Emirar Lord's Battle Gear with a dual axe. So this is now we're like getting into Wrath, I think. Tier 2, Earthen Battle Plate. Tier 11, Heroic Hammer and Board. Warrior Tier Armor. I've been raiding as a protection warrior for years. When it comes to tier gear, I'll admit that most of my attention is tuned to the stats they offer. When each new set is introduced, my first reaction usually will be to scan for the stat bonuses. But this doesn't mean that appearance means nothing. Whether you are Protection, Fury, or Arms, you absolutely must look fearsome. Over the tiers, the warrior armor sets have done this again and again. Many warriors hail the Tier 2's Wrath set as the pinnacle of the class's look, and it's hard to argue. The helm and shoulders are so sharp that a mob merely casting its gaze on it must feel twinges of pain. My personal favorite is Tier 8's Siegebreaker set. That was this one? Oh, I don't personally like that best. I like Tier 2. Not only does it come from my favorite raid instance, Ulduar, but it gives me the feeling that I am a mysterious engine of destruction. Isn't that why we play warriors? Getting your priest wings was a huge milestone. So now we're going to do the same kind of concept for priests. This is the class priest, the tier 5 set, where it drops the Eye or Serpent Shine Cavern When I conjure a priest in my imagination, the avatar set is what I see. Sorry, Shadow Priest, but this set is all about healing. The wings, halo, and cool colors tell the party that things will be fine. I'm watching over you all. It's as close to having a guardian angel as I'm ever going to get. In my guild, getting your priest wings was a huge milestone, and their joy was palpable even over voice chat. We've seen many, many sets since, and none have evoked such reactions. It is a cool set. Your turn. Tell us your favorite set and keep an eye out for it to appear in a future issue. It's like now, that's one big difference. We haven't seen that many call-outs like that, but now it's almost like they're begging for content for future issues. And look, we've just spent nearly 20 pages, at least 10 pages just looking at sets, not a lot of text. All right, so we are going to stop here, and it's because this Warcraft Saga comic, which unfortunately this is the one and only issue we'll ever get, is something I'm massively looking forward to. I don't think it's going to take a long time, but that'll give us kind of, on the next episode that we read, we'll be doing that, and I think it'll be fun. But for now, you know what we have. Another episode in the pipe by 5. Bye. Thanks everybody for watching and tuning in. And Gleecon, me, third person. We'll see you next time on Lore of Lore. I just can't talk.